I'm Thomas Smith, and today we are going to dive into writing an informational article about the topic for Married with Bichons on the websites here. And the topic we're going to write about today is a question-based topic. It's can Bichon Frises eat chocolate? So the first thing we're going to do is open up a new Google Doc here, and we're going to go ahead and put the title in. So can Bichon Frises eat chocolate? We're also going to put that at the beginning of the article, and we're going to put that in an H1. So now we're ready to go and start writing. So our first step after that is going to be to research all of the user questions around that topic, and also, of course, the correct answer to it. So we're going to launch a new incognito tab that prevents any of your own previous searches from changing what Google's going to show you. We're going to go to Google here. And then we're going to type in our query. So can Bichons eat chocolate? And then go through this and start to look for A, the answer to this question, and then B, some of the questions that users are asking around it. So obviously we could answer this question pretty quickly. You know, just starting to read through this, you can see pretty fast that the answer is no, they can't. We can start to look at why that is, but we also want to know what else are people asking, because we want to answer that question pretty rapidly, but we also want to expand on it and say, okay, what do people want to know once they know the answer? And so we're going to look at some sources for that too. Firstly, though, let's just look at the right answer, and we want to look for authoritative websites, like websites that are from a .edu or from a major organization, American Kennel Club. Do a little research, spend about 10 minutes learning about this topic, just figure out the correct answer to it so that you know that when you're ready to start diving in and writing. You can also make notes of some of these authoritative websites as sources. One thing that's helpful, we can also do cite, and we can say the colon and then star.edu, and that'll show us any edu websites. So generally pretty authoritative sources, like this is a vet clinic website here. And then also we can put in .gov and see for certain queries if there's any here. So those are great ways to narrow it down and find those really authoritative websites that will give you great information, but that you can also link to as sources. So now let's dive in and find some user questions that we can help to answer. So the first thing we'll look at again is the people also ask questions. Google is literally telling you other things people wonder when they enter that search result. And we're just going to copy some of these and put them directly into our document so we can try to answer those later on. And we want to try to get a bunch of these in there so we can have a lot to work from. And one tip is if you click the last people also ask topic, then it'll add some more to the bottom here. And we'll just keep putting them in. So you can kind of drill down and get all these very specific questions that you can start to copy and paste if they seem relevant to the article to start to add into that other document. Okay, now we have a bunch of those in there. We're going to make some changes to these later, but for now, let's go to our next source of questions. So our next thing, we're going to go to the Google autocomplete here. This is the text that we're entering into Google, and when you start to type things in here, Google will actually show you other things that people might search for related queries, and this can be very powerful. And what we want to do is add some other words. We can add when, if, how, why, those kinds of things. So when I say when Bichons eat chocolate, I get things like when Bichons, even just this query, when Bichons eat chocolate, probably not as much there. I could say if Bichons eat chocolate, what do you do? That's another question that we had in the other section. So you want to make note of anything that comes up in here that you haven't already addressed, or if it's things that are already showing up in the PAA questions, it just reiterates that this is important. You know, this one, if dogs eat chocolate, what do you do? And again, we'll get to how to personalize that. For certain queries, you'll find more information here. For this one, it's mostly the same as the PAAs, but just start to put in, when Bichons eat chocolate, if Bichons eat chocolate, how Bichons eat chocolate, and see if you can find any additional questions in here that you can go in and answer. And why can't dogs eat chocolate is a good one. So we could put that into our document. Okay, next we're going to use a couple of other tools. These are free tools. One is Deep Market. It's DEAP market.com. And we can enter our search query. It's going to give us customers questions. So I'm going to put in Bichon chocolate. You don't want to put the full question necessarily. You want to sort of get the couple of words that are most likely to show up. So in this case, I'm going to say Bichon chocolate. I'll put that in here. We'll see what it comes up with. You know, these are fairly similar to the other ones. So let's try to go one level up and say dog chocolate. Great. So these are all good kinds of things, and we can come through here and look for anything that we haven't found already. So I'm just looking through all of these. Some things aren't going to be related, like this is about the color of the dog, not the eating chocolate. But I'm seeing like which chocolate is dangerous, what chocolate is dangerous for dogs. That seems relevant. So again, we're just going to look through here, see if there's anything that we haven't covered already, and we'll go ahead and put that back into our document. And the final thing we'll use is Answer the Public, another free tool. And we learned before Bichon chocolate was a little too specific. We'll say dog chocolate, put that in. It's going to give us a list of questions again here. So we can look through the answers. I love that it presents it visually. The darker the dot, the more often these things are asked. And so you can see here they often find different responses than other things. So I'm seeing this concept of dog chocolate, which makes me really curious. Okay, there must be some kind of chocolate that dogs can have. So what is dog chocolate made of? Let's start to delve into that a bit. Let's get those into the document as well. And one quick tip, if you do on Windows Control-Shift-V, it'll paste the text into this document without the formatting, so you don't get like the weird orange formatting that we had over here. But this is, yeah, really interesting. Dog chocolate. All right, our dog chocolate drops safe for humans. Interesting. Let's put that in. New topic that we can explore here a bit more. And finally, let's see what else. Does dog chocolate melt? Curious. Great. Okay, so now we have all these questions in the document. Our next step is to organize this a bit more and also to personalize it to the actual topic that we're covering here. So this is all about dogs, but we want to talk about Bichons. This is a Bichon-related website. Again, you can look at the site and understand it's about Bichon frises. So let's personalize this to, instead of just dogs, to Bichon frises. And you have to use your description, or discretion here, rather. Say, you know, will my Bichon be okay if he ate a little bit of chocolate? This one can probably stay as dogs. What chocolate can dogs eat? Because it's not specific to Bichons necessarily. What do I do if my dog has eaten chocolate? We'll change that to Bichon. And just work your way through here and personalize these to the topic of the site. Next, let's think about what makes for a logical structure here. So you want to look through and kind of see, okay, what's the flow of information? And so I think the first thing that would come up here, you know, what do I do if my Bichon ate chocolate? Seems like the first question. So we'll put that first. Why can't dogs eat chocolate? Seems important. Get into these more specific questions. What kind of chocolate is most dangerous? What part of chocolate is poisonous? We'll get to that in a minute. And then these seem to be kind of related to this question of what chocolates can dogs eat. Apparently there's dog chocolate. That's something we'll research. So this is our basic structure. Now let's make all of these into headings. We're going to change this over to be H2s. And then let's think about, are any of these sort of subtopics? So what do I do if my Bichon has eaten chocolate? Seems like a main one. Why can't dogs eat chocolate? This seems like a subtopic of why can't dogs eat chocolate. We'll nest that in as an H3. A part of chocolate is poisonous. Also sounds like a subtopic of why they can't eat it. This is more about what to do, so we'll leave that as a main one. Now, this is into the question of dog chocolates. Each of these seem like a subtopic of that. So we'll make these H3s. And again, we're starting to create a structure to our article. We have the main question, we have these individual sort of sections, and then we have subtopics underneath, an H1, H2, and then H3s that are going to split up our actual paragraphs. Now, our final step before we actually start to really dig in and write here, all of these are questions, but not all of them necessarily need to be questions. So the first one we want to keep, can Bichon frises eat chocolate? What do I do if my Bichon has eaten chocolate? That's probably better to say, what to do if your Bichon eats chocolate. And you want to get a mixture of some that are questions, some that are sort of rephrased as statements, and just go through, use your own discretion, use your own style to change up some of these so it's not just an FAQ, question after question. Okay, so now we have a nice structure. It's kind of a little bit more split up in terms of different topics. We have our H2s and our H3s. Our next step here is going to be to write the intro to this article. So we're going to start with 1 to 2 sentences, just kind of introducing the question. So we'll say something like, many owners wonder if their Bichon Frise can eat chocolate. Humans love chocolate, and dogs often beg for it. So is it okay to sneak your Bichon a bit of chocolate every once in a while? So just something interesting that gets people's attention, gets them reading. Shouldn't be more than 1 or 2 sentences to lead in. Now, because this is a question in our title here, we want to quickly answer the question and do it succinctly, do it clearly, again, based on your research. So I'm literally going to say here, the answer is no. Bichon Frises, like all dogs, cannot safely eat chocolate. Chocolate contains Okay, so we answer the question. That's very important. If the user comes to this article, they don't have to do a lot of scrolling and looking to get the right answer front and center there. And we'll go back and link to some sources later on, but first and foremost, we want to answer that reader question first thing. Then we want to have a sentence that tells them, okay, here's why you want to keep reading. Here's more information you're going to get. And so we'll say, if you're concerned about So I'm addressing all the stuff we're gonna talk about here. Concerns people have, what we're gonna tell them in the article, and then one kind of chocolate that Bichons actually can eat, because we're gonna get into this dog-safe chocolate topic we discovered by looking at Answer the Public. So that's our intro. We're good to go. It shouldn't be long. It should introduce the topic. The one other thing that you can include here, if this is going to be under your byline and you're an expert, you can include something that tells the reader, who you are, why they should listen to you. You're going to cite great sources, but I'll say here, I have 2 Bichons, and I know that they always get interested eating candy. Just to establish, I know what I'm talking about. I have some personal experience here. Not necessary for all articles, but if you do have personal experience and it's under your byline, then great, go ahead and include that. So that's our intro. Our next step is going to be to actually go in and write each section of this article. And again, we're going to reference our research for that. So I often like to create another document or open some tabs where I have some authoritative sources that I can look at when I'm writing these sections. So again, I opened Google, I put in some of these questions like how much chocolate can a dog eat, and then I used that cite:*star.gov, and that gave me things like the FDA, really authoritative, good information in here that we can reference in the article. And I'm going to read through again. I usually spend about 10 minutes reading through this kind of information, and then I'll kind of tab over to these as I'm writing and reference specific information. So let's dive in based on that, and we're going to start writing the answers to these questions. So what to do if your Bichon eats chocolate. From reading through this, the first and most important thing here was if your Bichon Frise eats any amount of chocolate, always reach out to your vet immediately. So, you know, we want to look out for people. We want to make sure it's great that they're reading this article. We want them to read it. We want them to find it useful. But if it's something especially that has a very specific safety-related answer, we want to immediately tell them to go to an expert if that's the guideline. And that's the guideline just from reading these expert sources. So we'll read through these in more detail. We're going to write out each of these. And a couple of things to note, for these sections, you want to have maximum of 3 lines. So you can see I'm in here, I'm in an 11-point font, Arial font, and each of these sections is at most 3 lines long. If it's more than 3 lines, you want to split it up into a new chunk of text in here. You also want to make sure that every one of these headings has at least 50 words underneath it. And so we can highlight and say tool, word count, and make sure we've got at least 50 words. So we have 27 here. We need to keep writing. Generally, you want to have the right number of words to answer the question, as long as it's at least 50. So don't add fluff. Don't keep writing if it's not necessary. And you know, just start to answer these questions. Again, tabbing over to your research, and as we're doing that, we can also cite specific sources there. So I'm going to start writing, and we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so we've got some sections in here, again, referencing, you know, information about what you should do, like call your vet. That's, again, from the FDA. They say, if you think your dog is eating chocolate, call your vet immediately. So we want to make sure we're conveying that importance. I read stuff people say, oh, give them hydrogen peroxide. Well, no, I mean, we should contact our vet. Again, the FDA doesn't say anything about hydrogen peroxide, so just, you know, encouraging people to do that. But one thing we can say is when you call your vet, make note of any symptoms. And again, FDA and this other authoritative source in EDU domain talks about what are some of the signs and symptoms you might see. So I'm looking at these, and then I can reference some of these that people should be looking out for in the article. And to do that, I'm going to put in a bulleted list. Anytime where you can make a list, that's helpful. So we'll say in here, and we'll start to look at some of these symptoms. Vomiting, diarrhea, are ones that are coming up here. We've got increased heart rate, fast breathing. So let's put some of these in. And we can just make this list in here of different things, again, referencing those authoritative sources. And now that we've done that, we want to actually cite our source for some of this. So I'll say the FDA has a full list of symptoms to look for. And then that's where we're actually going to link to this. We'll take this here, and we'll link, you know, a full list of symptoms. Again, we want to send people to the correct information if that's the best place for them to look. So these are, you know, again, answering that question. We've got a good amount of text in here. We definitely have over 50 words, 137. And I think that's a good time to go on to the next section here. So this next section, why can't dogs eat chocolate? I got started on this. We're going to answer the question very directly. Looked through here, read some stuff about theobromine, and that's the reason they can't eat chocolate. This is pretty dense. It gets a little technical at different points, so we want to summarize it, make it as easy for people to understand as possible. And this is a good point to say, don't just copy and paste text. You always want to be rewriting and you know, in many cases, simplifying, making it easy for the reader to understand, directly answering questions. Why can't dogs eat chocolate? Well, they can't eat chocolate because it contains a compound called theobromine, which is toxic. And this is where it helps to, you know, do a little research, understand the topic, and then really delve in and kind of summarize it for people so that it makes sense for them. And as you're reading sources, always be, you know, looking out for that really interesting tidbit. Like I see here in this FDA page, it says chocolate contains theobromine. The compound is the same as family as caffeine and an asthma drug. So that's really interesting. So I'll include something referencing that. So I just threw a sentence in there. Interesting tidbit. Always be, you know, looking out for that thing that makes you say, huh, you know, it's you know, never knew that. It's kind of interesting information. So as we're writing here, I'm noticing, like, I'm talking about the most dangerous type of chocolate. What kind is most dangerous? It varies by type. That's information that I'm getting from this EDU source. So I'm going to go ahead and cite that, even if I'm not getting a quote directly out of it. And I'm just going to cite, depends on the amount of cocoa in it, where I got that information. Now, this, just from looking at some of these sources, like for example, I can see here this very specific breakdown with some numbers. This is a great opportunity to put in a table and break this out so that it's, this is a little hard to read, hard to understand. In a table form, I think this would be a lot easier. So let's go ahead back into the document. We're going to say insert table, and I'm going to do, looks like there were 3 different sections, 2 different items here. We'll put that in, and we'll say chocolate type and amount of theobromine. And let's look at the actual metric there per ounce. Bold the first line in that table. And then let's go back. We're going to look here. It was milk chocolate, semi-sweet, and baking. And if we need another line, we can right-click and say insert row below. And then let's go back and get our numbers in here. It's 44, 150, 390. What was the unit on that? Milligrams. And we'll say source, FDA, link to our source there. And you can see what was before, kind of narrative, kind of hard to understand. Now we have it in this very visual table format here. And so that's helpful when you have, this sort of anything you can summarize in a table, any numbers you can break out. It can be useful to do that. Okay, and after the table, I like to also just sort of summarize the content of it. So just talking about, answering the question again, the most dangerous chocolate. The most dangerous chocolate is baker's chocolate, right? Most dangerous type. So we want to talk about that specifically. Yeah, the most dangerous type of chocolate is baker's chocolate. So whenever you can literally answer the question you raise, that's really great. And we'll just continue on with this. One thing I'll note is as you write, you might find that some of the original structure doesn't make sense anymore. So like what part of chocolate is poisonous to Bichon Frises? Well, we already really answered that in this section here. We don't necessarily need to reiterate that again, so I can get rid of that. And likewise, this question, will my Bichon be okay if he ate a little bit of chocolate, really feels like a sub-topic of this one here. So I'm going to change it into an H3. And let's keep going. We'll keep writing through here. Now, as we're writing here, one thing to note, one service we can provide here is to customize the general information to the specific topic the reader is interested in. So this is about, will my Bichon be okay if he ate a little bit of chocolate? In reading through the FDA information, I'm seeing one of the factors that determines the danger of chocolate is your dog's size. So this is about dogs. This is about Bichons. I know how big a Bichon is, so I can synthesize those 2 things together and write something about the specific danger to a Bichon. So I wrote here, about how because Bichons are small, they're under 20 pounds. Again, you can research these kinds of things. It's extra important to reach out because, they're not a big dog. They're not a Rottweiler. So if size is one of the things we should be looking at and Bichons are small, it's even more reason to contact the vet. So again, we're finding this authoritative information and we are customizing it to the specific question the reader has here. Okay, so I think we've addressed most of the questions here. Now we can turn to the fun part here, dog safe chocolate. Again, we're going to want to research, and I did a little bit of research about that, and just, Googling dog safe chocolate. It sounds like carob is the dog safe chocolate here. And so I did, again, some research on that. Not so many .gov sites about that, but, Chewy is a reputable brand. We can trust information that they provide, and we can read a bit here and go into this. So I think this is a great, addition to this article because what are we talking about? Can Bichons eat chocolate? some people are probably seeing their dog, beg for chocolate, and they're like, well, that's really too bad. I can't give it to them. Is there something I can give them instead? And so we can answer that question for them. Dog safe chocolate. Here's a way that you can treat your Bichon to some chocolate. So let's just start to write these sections out here. I think it's less important to cite specific sources when we're not talking about these sort of health-related topics, but still good to cite things when it would be useful to the reader. So we'll just go in and start to write out these sections. Okay, so I wrote all this out here. If you buy carob treats in the store, some things to keep in mind. I linked to a recipe for some dog-safe chocolate. Again, we want to just provide as much useful information as possible. Let's finish out these 2 more sections here. Now, I've answered a lot of these questions, and some of these are so tactical, like does dog chocolate melt? We don't want to just add a bunch of fluff for that one, but we do want to answer the question. I mean, literally, that should just be a yes or no, maybe 1 or 2 sentences. So for these kinds of things, as I said, we want to have 50 words under our headings generally. For these, it would be too much to write 50 words. So what we're going to do is make that an H4. And we're going to literally just answer that question. We're going to say, yes, carob used for dog-friendly chocolate melts. Here is easy way to melt your carob. And we'll link out. I got an article about melting carob chips that we'll throw in there. So H4s are a great way to answer a very specific question that people asked, as we saw. We want to answer it, but we don't need a whole 50-word section for it. So just use an H4 and nest it underneath there, and we're good to go. Now our final step here, where you're going to put in a conclusion, and we're going to call it conclusion, which as a writer I find a little bit annoying, but it's helpful to people to know. This is the end, this is our conclusion. And we're not going to restate everything in the article because we already did a pretty good job of answering it. We're going to use 1 to maybe 5 sentences at the most and just basically say, you might be tempted, something that summarizes, feed your Bichon a little chocolate around the holidays. Don't as chocolate is for dogs. So that's a pretty good quick summary of what we covered in the article there for our conclusion. Doesn't need to be any longer than that. Now, a couple of things, this is basically done, but a couple of things we can do to make it even stronger. One is to work in some internal links to other pages of the site that this is going to appear on. So I'm going to go over to Married with Bichons. The longer the site, the more content, the easier it's going to be to find these things. So there's nothing that's super related. But how long do Bichons live, for example? I can copy that address, go back to this document, and I can add something in that sort of works that into the story. So here's a section here, this where we're talking about can they eat a little bit. I can say something like, Bichons often live to be 15 years old or older. So it's likely that in your dog's lifetime, you'll have at least one instance where they get into some chocolate. Again, that's why having a good vet on speed dial is essential. And I can link out here, live to 15 years or older. So it ties in, it's not irrelevant to the story, but it gives us an opportunity to internally link to something that relates. And again, the more content a site has, generally, the easier it'll be to find something that's extremely relevant. Now also, if this is going to be under your own byline and you know about the topic, you can put in some personal experiences. So I'll say here, one time around the holidays, my Bichons got into some milk chocolate coins. They ate a bunch of coins. So personal experiences, this really did happen to me, so I put that in there, and that really helps, not only to show that you know what you're talking about, but those personal experiences that people couldn't find, no matter how long they researched online, can be useful. If you don't have any personal experiences, another good tip there is you can go to Google and you can enter a related sort of search query, and then on Reddit, for example, or another forum website, and we can go through and look, and here's some personal stories about people's bichons eating chocolate, and we just be very transparent about where we're getting that. We'll say, some owners have shared their experiences with and we'll link to that article on Reddit. So, just to share some real world experiences is really valuable to the reader. And there we go. And that's our article about bichons eating chocolate. And I think we've covered a lot of great ground. We've really provided a lot of value to the user. And we have a great article here that's turns out to be about 1,200 words.